Welcome to the On-Premise IT podcast, the only show that dares to be both on topic or on premise, and sometimes even on location or on premises. Each time we meet, we bring together a group of IT experts to discuss a single premise or idea. On today's episode, we're talking about, VMware, the relevance of VMware, and basically the fact that VMware should really focus on the core vSphere ESX platform and stop with all the other stuff. Well, I'm not sure if everybody agrees with that, but we are actually all here together at VMware Explorer in Las Vegas this week. So I thought it would be interesting to do this. Now, admittedly, this is being recorded ahead of time, but trust me, we'll all be together very, very soon. So before we begin, let's meet who's on the panel today.
Hi, Matt Tyrer. I run a boutique consultancy group called The Competitive Corner. You can find us at www.competitivecorner.ca. I specialize in data protection, disaster recovery, cyber resilience topics, and help vendors and other organizations building out their competitive intelligence programs.
Hi, I'm Andy Banta. I was at VMware for quite a while. These days, I am just the storage janitor and general nuisance. You can find me on Twitter at Andy Banta, and my blog, which I need to get back into these days, is andybanta.substack.com.
And I'm Allyson Klein. I'm the principal of the Tech Arena. We are a media platform talking all things tech from cloud to edge. And in my spare time, I help brands with their technology strategies and bringing technology to the market. You can find me at www.thetecharena.net.
And I am Stephen Foskett, organizer of Tech Field Day and publisher of Gestalt IT. I talk about a lot of things. You can find me here on the On-Premise podcast, as well as the Utilizing Tech podcast on Mondays and the weekly news rundown on Wednesdays with Gestalt IT. So one place you can also find me, frankly, a lot of the time for literally, 15 years now, is VMworld. I'm sorry. I mean, VMware Explorer. VMware Explorer, the artist formerly known as VMworld, it has been the central tech gathering for so many years because VMware was in everything. And VMware was basically the tech platform. It was the data center platform. It was the transformative technology for everything. But frankly, over the years, VMware got involved in a lot of things. VMware has a very excellent storage, a bunch of storage technologies. I don't want to say storage platform because it's not, it's a bunch of storage technologies. It does storage real good. VMware has a really great bunch of networking technologies that do networking real good. VMware has a place in VDI and in Edge and in the cloud. But is that really what VMware should do? And more to the point, is that really what VMware is going to do going forward? Or should VMware just focus on the core platform? Andy?
So VMware for a long time, actually VMworld for a long time, and VMware were very agnostic in terms of dealing with various different companies, storage companies, processor companies, networking companies. They were kind of a center point where everybody could join and work together and have common products. In fact, VMworld was one of the great places where competitors would actually work together to make things even better. And the core of all of this was the hypervisor. The hypervisor was the thing that actually pulled the storage vendors, the networking vendors, the processor vendors all together and allowed them to collaborate and come up with platforms with systems that were useful for everyone. This kind of changed over the years where VMware kept trying to branch out into new things. And instead of actually working with the storage companies, they attempted to go be a competitor with the storage companies. Instead of actually working with networking companies, they decided to go off, be a competitor with networking companies. And not only has that kind of hurt the community, but it's branched, it means VMware is kind of spread out into business pieces that aren't their core competency. The hypervisor, the vSphere, the combination of ESXi and vCenter are really the core pieces of VMware, and those are still things that I think probably bring in the largest amounts of revenue for VMware. I have not looked at their financial statements, so that's an opinion.
When you look at, are those other ancillary components like NSX, like some of the networking and that, are you suggesting that they bring those into, kind of that hypervisor itself, so that when you get the hypervisor, you get all of the security, you get all the edge, you get all of that, kind of collapsing what they've got as these different business units down into just the one? Or are you saying that they should shed those just completely and focus on that core competency?
Well, in response to you, it's not necessarily that they should necessarily shed all of it. I mean, with vSAN and NSX, they've actually largely integrated those with vSphere, with the core. And to be honest, NSX is a very valuable product. NSX is one of the, again, a very cross platform product that is able to work on things that are VM related, physical networking capabilities, and containers as well. So I actually, it, it's not to say that NSX isn't part of their core competency, but I see NSX as a partner product along with ESXi and vSphere. Um, in terms of, in terms of their efforts to do cloud integration, it's just like the hyperscalers have an awful lot of uh, expertise on those topics already, and there's just all sorts of other things that VMware has kind of tried to branch out into. They at one time they had an application suite and a mailer, and realized that those weren't actually part of their core competencies and abandoned those. But I think there are other things that are not part of their core competency, and uh, just aren't necessarily things that they should be focusing on.
I'm curious about, is the gravity of being a hypervisor company enough to keep VMware viable? And are the cloud providers providing the tools and core capabilities that are enough of a, comp- competition to having a VMware hypervisor centric world in the enterprise? Are there core capabilities with the cloud providers that VMware becomes less important? And I would love the views on from you guys on this. I think that one of the reasons why they keep inventing these new technologies is they're trying to discover their identity in a cloud native world, um, and not just become, you know, a a legacy technology that enterprise continues to use and, kind of just go off into obscurity over time.
Kind of like a utility, if you will, in terms of we have power, we have water kind of thing. We have hypervisors. Is it still relevant which hypervisor I have or which I use? I think when you look to your point at the hyperscalers and what they've been doing, and you could trace that back to Microsoft and the development of Hyper-V. There's more choice in terms of the platforms, and really the differentiation between, do I use VMware or do I use, one of the cloud native ones? I think it's become harder and harder. So, to kind of coming back to Andy's point, and you touched on it as well, is I kind of see the branch out as them trying to find another that next point of differentiation. So like, this is why you choose VMware, because you also get, XYZ that comes along with that in terms of these other products that they can either cross sell or upsell into your subscription or however you're consuming it.
And there's a couple real advantages to VMware's hypervisor that makes them very valuable compared to the cloud native uh, hyperscalers and potentially other virtualization products that are out there. They offer the ability to do vMotion, so you can actually move a running VM from one place to another, and that capability actually works in between a physical implementation of a VM, or an on premises VM into the cloud or back out using VMware technology. VMware also has the ability to do uh, memory over provisioning, and that's another thing that's very difficult to do in lots of other cases. And I think one of the biggest places where VMware is going to retain their relevance is not everybody can run or everybody wants to run in a public cloud. Some people actually want to run their clouds on their own, in their own data center, and some places actually require that they do that.
And I think that that's actually a key point. I mean, first off, I think all of us are agreeing that VMware has amazing, useful technology. I think all of us are arguing that VMware's core offering and core value proposition remains incredibly credible even today, even as things have transitioned into the cloud. Um, I guess the question is that enough? Is that enough for users? Is that enough for the market? Is that enough for VMware themselves? Because essentially, playing the devil's advocate here, isn't it good enough to be great? Shouldn't you be happy being great at a thing? VMware fundamentally is a bridge to the past. It allows conventional applications that were never designed to be cloudy, that were never designed to be flexible, that were designed to own the server and run on the server. It allows them to run in a much more flexible, much more high performant, much more highly available, much less cost. All these things, the core value proposition for the VMware hypervisor, the VMware product, remain the same. The problem is that the world, and I don't want to say the world has moved past, because it really hasn't. I mean, how many cloud native applications are there really? Not that many, especially when you talk about enterprise applications. But increasingly, that's where the world is going. And VMware, as Allyson said, I love that phrase that you said. I feel like VMware is trying to find themselves in this cloud world, and I'm not sure they have. And not to put too fine of a point on it, but I'm not sure they have time. That Broadcom is going to take over the company. Broadcom is going to want it to be what the premise of this episode is, and frankly, that's pretty much all she wrote, right?
I think that's why this VMworld Explorer is so interesting to see the tone and tenor of this company and this leadership team. Where is their vision? Where do they want to take this company? Are they feeling the same thing that we're feeling about centering in on what they're good at? It doesn't seem like the keynotes themes are reflecting that. I think that they're still out there with a much broader vision for the company and the technology innovation that they're driving and the relevance of that technology innovation in this landscape. So I'm really curious to see how they tell a security message, how they tell their edge message, how they tell a story about engaging with the broader ecosystem, and what they say about the pending acquisition.
I think those are interesting as well. I did want to touch on something that Stephen said. One of the key things that VMware enables, especially in an on-premises situation, is it allows you to make use of multi-core processors, and that's one of the things that really didn't exist before VMware. Before VMware showed up on the scene, typically you had one or two cores per processor, and now when we have 96 cores per processor, there's no application in the world that can take advantage of 96 cores other than VMware. And VMware does this by allowing you to run 96 different VMs on those 96 different cores and be able to have all of those applications run in parallel on a single highly dense core processor. So that's one of the things that VMware really has enabled that wouldn't have happened if VMware didn't have a hypervisor that allowed this type of thing.
And on that point too, Andy, it's not just the cores either. It's all the other things that are happening in server architecture right now. Memory. If you look at CXL, it's going to enable us to have huge piles of memory to go with our huge piles of cores. On the storage side, we've got amazing, incredible scalability of performance and capacity. I mean, we're talking to AMD as well. They're presenting to Tech Field Day along with VMware, and frankly, those machines would be kind of worthless if it wasn't for VMware, at least with conventional applications.
Absolutely. I mean, the number of cores and the number of of PCIe lanes that you get on the Genoa and Bergamo processors that are out there now are incredible.
Yeah, I think, as you said, just the ability to leverage the actual horsepower that's being produced by some of the storage and infrastructure vendors out there, would have been impossible to do had a technology like VMware not come around. But now that there are other vendors that can deliver on that, I mean, we see some of the storage vendors have introduced their own hypervisors, to leverage their technology and their underpinnings as efficiently as they can. And then what are we going to? I guess we'll address the elephant in the room. That next evolution of the hypervisor is that containers? Like we haven't even touched on that yet. So what I'm interested in what the group has to say about how does that shift the conversation? Do we now all of a sudden everybody goes to containers? I don't agree with that. I think that we're going to see still a time and a place, and I don't think even the container market really understands where that is going to find its forever home.
And I'll throw in a quick comment on containers. First off, the VMware became very successful because they weren't an open source project. They actually had a vision for what they wanted to do and built it. And containers largely are trying to be driven by open source. And while they're becoming valuable through open source, they don't have the single vision leadership that VMware did to get where they were going. That said, the other huge downside of containers is they don't provide application safe runtime environments. They don't. If you have an application that crashes and it takes down its VM, all you have to do is reboot the VM. If you have a container that crashes its runtime environment, it actually takes down the entire container runtime environment on that server. And that's one of the key things that was very valuable about the hypervisor concept, is the idea that an application cannot go off and hurt the other things that are sharing a processor with it.
Andy, you made a couple of good points in there, and one that I just wanted to touch on quickly because I think there was a few directions that we could go on. That is, everything else that goes along with running kind of the container environment versus VM environment, that resiliency, how it behaves when it's been impacted by an outage or some downtime. Like you said, being able to just spin the VMs back up or vMotion them somewhere else where they can continue running in an HA configuration, as opposed to containers where you actually have to kind of rebuild everything. I remember coming from the backup side of things, that was one of actually the big differences too, in terms of how you back up those environments. How do you protect those environments? Whereas, if I have to rebuild the whole environment before I can start recovering the actual data, those are all things for sure in terms of those core differences. But good points.
Yeah, and on the container front too, I mean, frankly, containers can do a lot of the sort of hyperconverged things that we want virtualization to do, but only really if you've got good container orchestration and good container friendly applications. And so I absolutely think that a modern web application running in Kubernetes is just as good as a conventional application running on vSphere, but with maybe some technical differences, and just as scalable and just as capable of using that hardware, but not everything. And that's, I think, one of the aspects here is that we still need containers. And one of the areas that we need containers, so as I mentioned, we've got another podcast utilizing Edge, and Allyson, you and I have hosted that podcast and discussed Edge as well. Edge is like a new brownfield. Edge is like or a gray field. It's like the data center before virtualization. And frankly, one of the things that we've said on utilizing Edge is Edge needs virtualization. Edge needs a hypervisor because there's so many conventional applications, old school applications that need to be consolidated. And Edge is rapidly adopting hyperconverged infrastructure. Yeah, it's also adopting containers, but not container orchestration, just containers as a way to contain applications and configure applications. So, the theme of the keynote for VMware Explorer is something something Edge. Do they mean Edge? Allyson, what do you think?
I really hope so. As we've explored Edge and talked to different vendors playing in the Edge, it's very obvious that the Edge and the future of distributed computing is going to be a combination of VMs, containers, even I'm going to throw in WebAssembly and microservices for a second, just to say that there's a lot of room for innovation in this space. Um, and I think that VMware absolutely has a role there because the edge is about the enterprise, and VMware, if anything, has a wonderful rooting in enterprise IT and the enterprise IT decision makers that are making choices about the software that they're going to utilize. I'd love to hear what their vision is for multi-cloud to multi-edge hypervisor control and what they're going to do to innovate. We've talked about how there's challenges with interoperability, and Andy talked a little bit earlier on vMotion interoperability across environments. Um, that is going to get more complex with Edge. We've also talked about heterogeneity of compute and different microprocessor architectures coming into play across these environments. We've seen that Ampere has been amping up, no pun intended, some of their deployments across the cloud. How does that influence somebody like VMware to make sure that the core capabilities that they're using in edge environments and cloud environments are going to offer the same differentiation that they've enjoyed historically? And I think that that's going to be something that's going to be really interesting to see next week.
I think we're all kind of interested in, and I think, in listening to the expected attendance this year, I think a lot of people are very interested in seeing what VMware has to say and what, like you said, what their tone, what's their direction, what's their vision, because this is the first VM Explorer post all of the Broadcom stuff. So, or well, that's still continuing. So, seeing, well, are they going to kind of bring everything together? It doesn't look like it. It looks like they're continuing to explore all of these different branches, and I think that's probably, as going back to something Allyson said quite a while ago. Um, part of them still trying to expand and find what is that next. Um, that next space that we can move ourselves into and get and be continue to expand those points in terms of the revenue and growth and new markets and expanding what VMware is across all these different data landscapes.
Right. And I don't know if it's time to actually bring this up, but most of the things that we've been talking about actually have been where VMware's hypervisor and to some extent NSX are valuable, not where their other offerings have been terribly valuable. And this goes back to another discussion that Stephen and I had elsewhere some point, where it's like all the social media platforms are trying to be everything to everyone. Zoom now wants to have chat in it. Uh, Facebook and whoever want to try to be the new Twitter or whatever. And it's like, no, stick to your core competency. We use your product for the particular reason that we chose it, and we're not interested in using your product for things that we have other products to use for already. So this is kind of like the hypervisor and NSX are VMware's key competencies. Just jumping back very quickly on containers, one of the things that makes VMware very valuable is they have vCenter, which controls their VMs, and you don't actually have something that nobody has anything as comprehensive as vCenter to maintain containers.
Absolutely, and I think that one of the things that people might look at this and say, man, VMware should focus on vSphere and the hypervisor, and isn't that terrible? No, it's not. That's the thing. You've got a great product. You've got an incredible product. vCenter is amazing. The NSX is actually NSX, I think, is the exception to the premise. I think NSX has value, and a lot of the other networking things that VMware is doing have value outside of the hypervisor and outside of what we're talking about here. And so I think that VMware, in a way, is kind of a two-product company. It's the networking and the hypervisor company. They haven't transitioned into like making a ton of money off the cloud. I would include the storage work and some of the networking work as well on the hypervisor side, because this whole hyperconverged infrastructure concept, basically, get the most out of your hardware by having your hardware be the whole data center. And that's really what VMware has done in storage, is basically make storage useful and make storage easy. And that's with a lot of the vSAN stuff, but also through vCenter and everything. It's just so much more user friendly, and that's not bad. I love this. I love this product, and like I said, this is, in my opinion, what Broadcom might be wanting from the company anyway. So in a way, I would like to dispel people's fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and kind of hate mongering about, oh, VMware is going to get blah 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 blah. No, I mean, like, it's going to refocus, and they've already refocused. I mean, they've already spun off and gotten rid of some of their non-core applications. And how is this any different from what Cisco or Microsoft or Intel or any of these other companies have done? They look at their market, they look at their products, and they say, these are the ones we're going to keep. These are the ones that don't have a future. And so is it bad? Is it bad for us to say that VMware should focus on vSphere and focus on being the great virtualization company?
I just think that if they want to be an innovator, they have the right to be an innovator. And they've proven, to your point, I think we've all said NSX is a great product. It's something that exists outside of their core business, and they've proven it to be something that's market leading and valuable. Can't they do it again? And, I think that, that's the real question on the table is, do they have the opportunity to innovate in a different space? And if they did, what would that space be given everything that we've talked about?
I think, see, I think that that's where Edge comes into play, is trying to extend out into, the furthest reaches of the data center, being the edge layer. And you can see in some of the sessions, some of the keynotes even are very much focused on kind of that next extension. And I think, Steve, as you had said, um, the need to be running, these enterprise data center applications, but running them outside of the data center, will kind of drive that edge compute, edge storage, and edge hypervisor innovation space. So I'm excited to see where it goes on the edge side of things myself, and want to see what they have planned and in store for getting out there.
Understandable, yes. And I'm not saying that VMware shouldn't innovate, and VMware has been innovating. I just think that the innovations they have done in their hypervisor are some of the most valuable. The idea that you can now virtualize NV memory, the fact that you can now virtualize GPUs, the idea that there's so many different components of a physical system that you can now virtualize into your VM. These are all very innovative things, and they're very valuable things. And it's like I see the value in innovating more in the virtualization, the hypervisor side of things. It's if they can come up with another transformative product like NSX, more power to them. But it seems right now that some of their focuses are scattered elsewhere.
Yeah, I think that's really what it is. It's all about sort of the scattered focus. And so if we go back to VMworld, like transport yourself back to VMworld in 2018 or 2019, and VMware was positioned honestly as the everything company. It was, we got all this and more. We can do this, we can do that. It slices, it dices. Just look at that tomato. We're going after the cloud. We're going after the edge. We're going after vehicles. We're going after security. We're going after everything. And I think that the company really has refocused, and I think it's good to focus. I mean, to Allison's point, yes, it's also good to innovate. And I don't want to see innovation starved off. But like Andy is saying, I mean, innovation happens in the core areas as well. And as Matt says, I mean, Edge is a great area for this to go. And think about it too. Edge is one of the very few remaining unconquered markets for technology, to be platformized, I guess. And there's another aspect too that I love about it, and that's that Edge is fundamentally an area that needs hyperconvergence, storage expertise, networking expertise. I mean, we've talked about a lot of really amazing edge networking, security expertise. I mean, basically all the things that VMware has are what is needed in the edge. And so it makes a lot of sense. I mean, even like the SD-WAN stuff that you might be kind of like, how does that fit into the data center? Oh, it fits into the edge, that's for sure. And so it's really interesting to see kind of the relevance of all this in that one kind of new frontier, new continent. Before we go, let me get back to the premise. VMware should focus on the hypervisor. VMware should focus on vSphere, and VMware should be the great hypervisor, the great virtualization company. Who wants to go first and kind of sum up your thoughts on that premise?
I'll go. I think that VMware should be a deciding voice in how hypervisors fit into a distributed computing landscape and be the friend to enterprise in delivering that. I can't wait to hear what Raghu and the team say next week, and I'm really excited. Other than the fact that we haven't even discussed this, Stephen, VMware Explorer, a new event, a new city. We will be in Las Vegas in August. It should be interesting.
I think that we've brought up an awful lot of interesting topics. I think that VMware does have lots of room to innovate on their core products. I think that they aren't going anywhere. They have a very valuable product that is probably uh, doing incredibly well. We'll hear about how that they're doing now, and I wish VMware no ill will. I think that let's pay attention to where the money comes from.
Yeah, I think one of the greatest strengths of the VMware platform was its interoperability. You know, the ability, and we were kind of talking this before we started recording. Uh, you know, it brought all the vendors together in this agnostic space where you could, you know, build your environment the way you wanted to with the technologies you wanted to, and have a very hybrid, heterogeneous environment, but still being able to layer on that platform on top of it. And I think that was a really incredible strength of the platform. But I think we all agree that that they have powerful tools in their portfolio, and you know, we're all really excited to see what they have in store for us in terms of where their vision takes them. And I'm excited to see what they have to say next week or now in Vegas.
Absolutely, it's a little confusing, time shifting, but yes, as this is aired, we will be in Las Vegas. We will be experiencing either the heat or maybe not the heat. Apparently, it's supposed to be a cool snap in Vegas. Well, we'll see, and we'll let you know. So before we go, where can we connect with you? Where can we continue this conversation? If you agree with us, if you disagree with us, if you want to yell at us, Allyson, where should people yell at you?
Well, I've covered a lot of the topics that we've talked about today with folks in the industry on my Tech Arena podcast. You can check that out on www.thetecharena.net or anywhere you get your podcasts.
And I'm Andy Banta. You can catch up with me mostly on Twitter at Andy Banta. I'm also on LinkedIn, and you can check out my most recent thoughts on at andybanta.substack.com.
And Matt Tyrer here. You can reach out to me via www.competitivecorner.ca, or I'm most often found on Twitter under at Matt's Stylin' Hat. And maybe you'll see that hat in Vegas.
I can't wait to see that hat in Vegas, man. I'm going to steal that hat. This is Stephen Foskett. As I said, you'll find me at Gestalt IT. You'll find me on most social media networks at sfoskett, including, yes, the X, as well as, yes, the Mastodon, and yes, the Blue Sky, and yes, the Threads. I'm everywhere you need to be. Also, please do check out all the coverage coming out of VMware Explorer this week. We're going to have some Tech Field Day presentations from the VMware NSX and security team. We've also got AMD presenting, talk about many cores. And we are going to be doing some on-site technical interviews as well. So check out Gestalt IT and keep an eye out for that. Also, the Gestalt IT Rundown is coming to you live from Las Vegas on premises. with myself and Mr. Tom Hollingsworth on Wednesday. And so everything's coming from Las Vegas, and we'll see how it goes. If you enjoyed this discussion, please do subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Please give us a rating. Please give us a review. You'll find us in your favorite podcast platform, and you'll also find us on YouTube at Gestalt IT Video. This podcast is brought to you by GestaltIT.com, your home for IT coverage from across the enterprise. For show notes and more episodes, go to GestaltIT.com/podcast. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next week.